So, Patrick Christys is back from being ill, and apparently he spent his sick days planning the most savage takedown of Keir Starmer I've seen in weeks. I mean, when you come back from being poorly, and your first move is to compare the Prime Minister to not one, but two of the world's most controversial dictators on live television, you know it's going to be spicy. Stick around because this got absolutely mental. And honestly, the nicknames he came up with are already spreading across social media faster than COVID did in 2020. Too soon? Probably. Do I care? Not really. Right, so Friday night on GB News, Patrick Christys is back in the hot seat after having to bail on his show earlier in the week because he was genuinely unwell. Now, most people, when they return from sick leave, might ease back into things, maybe discuss something light, perhaps the weather or a royal family update. Not Patrick. This man came back swinging like he'd been storing up all his energy specifically for this moment. He looked at the camera, looked at his studio audience, and decided that what Britain really needed was to see their prime minister photoshopped onto the bodies of authoritarian leaders. And honestly, the commitment to the bit was kind of impressive. He kicks things off by talking about Labour delaying elections, which, fair enough, is a legitimate story. Nearly 10 million people won't get to vote until 2027, which is a pretty big deal when you think about it. But then Patrick goes nuclear with the delivery. He asks his audience, and I quote, "Are we being run by Keir Jong Un?" And just when you think he's made his point, GB News actually airs an edited clip of Keir Starmer's face digitally placed onto Kim Jong Un's body, walking down a red carpet like he owns the place. The audience is laughing, the production team clearly had way too much fun making that graphic, and you can tell Patrick is absolutely loving every second of it. It's the kind of telly that makes you simultaneously think, this is brilliant, and are we allowed to do this? But wait, because Patrick wasn't done, one dictator comparison apparently wasn't enough to satisfy his creative vision. He follows it up immediately with another nickname, and this one's even better. What about Vladimir Putin, he says, barely able to keep a straight face himself. And yes, they had another edited photo ready to go, this time showing Starmer's face on Vladimir Putin's body at some public speaking event. The audience is eating it up, laughing along, and you can feel the energy in that studio. It's the kind of moment that makes you realize how much British political commentary has changed. We've gone from boring parliamentary debates on BBC to this, and honestly, I'm not complaining. Now, before anyone accuses Patrick of just doing this for cheap laughs, he does actually explain what's happening, which is important because underneath the comedy, there's a genuine issue here. Labour and the Tories, two parties that supposedly hate each other's guts, are apparently working together to delay local elections. Patrick claims they're both terrified of Reform UK making gains, so they've had a little chat and decided, you know what, let's just postpone things for a bit. According to Patrick, Labour asked the Conservatives if they fancied delaying local and mayoral elections, and both parties were like, absolutely, mate, sounds brilliant. Which, if you think about it, is kind of wild. These are the same people who spend prime minister's questions shouting at each other like they're in a particularly aggressive episode of Jeremy Kyle. But when it comes to protecting their own seats, suddenly they're best mates having a lovely time agreeing on things. Patrick points out that around 63 local councils could have their elections delayed, which affects millions of voters across the country. He specifically mentions places like Suffolk, East Sussex, West Sussex, and Essex, areas where elections have already been postponed once. And here's where it gets properly dodgy. If these elections get delayed again, some councillors will end up sitting in their positions for 7 years without ever having to face voters again. 7 years. That's longer than most people keep the same phone. It's longer than most relationships last these days. And these councillors get to keep their jobs, collecting their salaries, making decisions that affect people's lives, all without actually having to win an election. Patrick calls it mad, and honestly, that might be the understatement of the century. The rules apparently say that ministers will agree to postpone elections scheduled for next May until 2027 if local authorities request it by mid-January. So we've got this weird situation where councils can just ask for their elections to be delayed, and the government is essentially rubber stamping it. No big debate, no public consultation, just, yeah, sure, we'll sort that out for you. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder who's actually running this country and whether anyone remembers that democracy is supposed to involve people actually voting at some point. Earlier in the week, Nigel weighed in on all this, which is about as surprising as discovering that water is wet. The Reform UK leader accused Labour and the Conservatives of deliberately working together to stop his party from making further gains. And look, you might not like Nigel Farage, a lot of people don't, but in this instance, it's kind of hard to argue with his logic. When you've got two major parties that claim to be complete opposites, suddenly agreeing to delay elections right when a third party is surging in the polls, it does look a tiny bit suspicious. It's like watching two rival football teams suddenly decide to postpone their match because a new team just joined the league and they're actually quite good. You'd be asking questions, wouldn't you? The timing of all this is particularly interesting because Reform UK has been making serious gains in recent polls. They're picking up support from voters who are fed up with both Labour and the Conservatives, which, let's be honest, is quite a lot of people these days. Trust in mainstream politics is at an all-time low, politicians are less popular than traffic wardens, and along comes Reform saying all the things that traditional parties won't say. Whether you agree with Reform's policies or not, you can't deny they're shaking things up, and apparently shaking things up enough that the establishment is getting nervous and reaching for the delay button. What makes Patrick's segment so effective is that he's not just ranting into the void, he's backing up the humor with actual facts and pointing out genuine concerns about how our democracy is functioning. The nicknames are funny, the graphics are ridiculous, but underneath all that, there's a genuine question being asked. Why are elections being delayed? Who benefits from this? And most importantly, should voters be worried that their right to have a say is being quietly pushed back without much fanfare or explanation? These aren't conspiracy theories or wild speculation. These are legitimate questions about how power works in this country. The reaction to Patrick's show on social media has been massive. Twitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it this week, has been flooded with people sharing clips of the segment. Some people think it's hilarious and exactly the kind of sharp political commentary we need. Others are clutching their pearls and claiming it's disrespectful to compare a democratically elected prime minister to dictators. But here's the thing about satire. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable. It's supposed to push boundaries and make people think. If political comedy only ever made fun of people we already dislike, it would be pointless. The whole point is to hold power to account. And right now, Keir Starmer has the power. It's worth remembering that this isn't the first time GB News has stirred up controversy with its approach to covering politics. The channel has built its entire brand on being different from the BBC and Sky News, offering commentary that's more opinionated, more direct, and yes, sometimes more provocative. Whether you think that's brilliant or terrible probably depends on your own political views, but you can't argue with the fact that it gets people talking. Patrick Christys returning from sick leave to immediately go after the Prime Minister with photoshopped dictator images is peak GB News energy, and their audience absolutely loves it. But let's zoom out for a second and think about what this all means for British politics more broadly. We've got a situation where local elections are being delayed, potentially for years, with relatively little public debate or outcry. We've got two major parties apparently coordinating behind the scenes to protect their interests. We've got a rising third party claiming the system is rigged against them. And we've got media personalities like Patrick Christys using humor and satire to point out how absurd it all is. This is modern British politics in a nutshell. It's messy, it's chaotic, it's sometimes funny, and it's definitely not what they teach you in GCSE citizenship classes. The comparisons to Kim Jong Un and Vladimir Putin might seem over the top, and they probably are, but that's kind of the point. Patrick is using exaggeration to highlight what he sees as concerning behavior from the government. When you delay elections, you're preventing people from having their say. When you coordinate with your supposed political opponents to maintain the status quo, you're undermining the competitive nature of democracy. And when you do all this while a populist party is gaining ground, it looks like you're scared of what the voters might actually say if given the chance. Those are uncomfortable truths, and wrapping them in comedy makes them easier to digest and harder to ignore. The audience reaction in the studio tells you everything you need to know about how this is resonating with people. They're laughing, but it's that kind of knowing laughter that suggests they get the underlying point. It's funny because it's uncomfortable. It's entertaining because it's saying what a lot of people are thinking, but mainstream politicians won't acknowledge. That's the sweet spot for this kind of commentary, where humor meets legitimate criticism and creates something that people actually want to watch and share. So where does this leave us? Well, Keir Starmer now has two new nicknames that will probably follow him around on social media for at least the next few weeks. GB News has once again proven it knows how to generate headlines and get people talking. Christys has firmly re-established himself as one of the most provocative voices in British political media, and the actual issue of delayed elections and democratic accountability is getting more attention than it probably would have through a dry news report. Mission accomplished, I'd say. The broader story here is about how British political discourse is changing. We're moving away from the formal, buttoned-up approach of traditional broadcasters and towards something more raw, more direct, and willing to take risks. Whether you think that's brilliant or terrible probably depends on your own political views, but you can't argue with the fact that it gets people talking. Christys coming back from being ill and immediately going for the jugular shows he understands his role in his audience perfectly. As we head into 2025 with elections potentially being delayed left and right, with Reform UK continuing to shake up the political landscape, and trust in traditional politics at rock bottom, expect to see more moments like this. Expect more provocative commentary, more social media firestorms, and more politicians being given unflattering nicknames on live television.